Welcome to a James Bell Associates podcast series on pathways to child welfare careers. This podcast series was developed on behalf of the Children's Bureau, Administration for Children and Families, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, by James Bell Associates, a consulting firm based in the Washington, D.C. area that provides research, evaluation, and technical assistance services in child welfare and related human service fields. For this podcast series, we'll be discussing programs and initiatives at the federal, state, and local level, and through partnerships with community colleges and universities to assist students in obtaining the academic and professional credentials needed to launch careers in child welfare, and to support current professionals through ongoing training and support programs. To introduce listeners to an array of perspectives on building and sustaining the child welfare workforce, Drs. Barczyk and Leah Bouchard with James Bell Associates will be speaking with child welfare professionals, students, and academics who each bring unique and valuable insights into the various avenues for launching a career in child welfare and for aiding current professionals through ongoing training and support systems. Thank you for joining us as we learn about educational and training pathways for careers in child welfare.
Hello, this is Amanda Barczyk.
And this is Leah Bouchard.
Today we're excited to speak with Melissa Batalden Mendez, Drew Middendorf, and Christine Sammon. Melissa is a licensed clinical social worker in the Metro Twin Cities area of Minnesota. Her current role is with the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy, working with the Minnesota Title IV-E Child Welfare Consortium, a group of 9 Minnesota B.S.W. and M.S.W. programs that have child welfare-specific programming to prepare social workers to work in public, private, and tribal settings. Our next guest, Drew, is a recent graduate from Southwest Minnesota State University social work program. Drew is an active member of the M.S.W. esports team and social work club. Finally, Chris has been a social worker in rural southern Minnesota for more than 25 years, working with youth, family meeting conferencing, mental health, and county case management, and is currently the Child and Family Services Division Manager for Rice County Community Services. She received her B.S.W. from Minnesota State University at Mankato and returned for the M.S.W. through the Title IV-E Scholarship Program. Thank you all so much for being here. As you all know, Title IV-E education programs serve a critical role for reducing financial and education barriers to careers in child welfare. And that's why we wanted to really talk about it in today's episode. Melissa, could you tell us what a Title IV-E education program is and the specifics of the Minnesota Title IV-E Child Welfare Consortium?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for inviting us. And we're really excited to talk about the Title IV-E child welfare programming that's happening in our state of Minnesota.
We're so excited to have you.
Thanks. So kind of backing it up to how it came into Minnesota. So this is federal funds through the Title IV-E Social Security Act. The Minnesota Title IV-E Consortium was created in 2005. Really set up to address the needs for social workers, like Chris said, specifically trained in child welfare. So our consortium member universities, they contract with the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families for this federal IV-E funds and provide that funding to B.S.W. and M.S.W. students that have an interest in, and not just interest in, but really a commitment to this work. Each of the individual programs, so as you said, there's 9 universities that are part of our consortium, and they each look a little different. They're located in different geographic locations. If you were to look at a map of Minnesota, you would see these 9 universities geographically mapped out in different places. Like we have Bemidji State, which is up in the northwest. We have University of Minnesota Duluth, which is our northeast. In southeast, it's Mankato State, Winona State, and then Southwest, which is where Drew goes, Southwest Minnesota State University. And then St. Cloud State's kind of our middle, if you look right at the middle. So geographically, we're really cover just it's a great representation of the different practice areas. And, if we're thinking of practicing down in Rice County where Chris works, that looks really different than practicing in Hennepin County, which is our largest, most populated county, which is where Minneapolis is, or Ramsey County, that's where
Right.
St. Paul is. So the practice looks different. Um, so the consortium is made up of all these universities, and the main kind of aspects, of course, are the financial pieces for the students to help support them to be able to get this degree. Um, and then there's educational and programmatic expectations and requirements. So that could be coursework, experiential learning in the communities out there serving, for sure internships, which is a part of all social work curriculum. But their internships are specifically have to be related to child welfare. And for our B.S.Ws, their final internship has to be in a county or tribe or the state of Minnesota, which would be in Department of Children, Youth, and Families under the umbrella of child safety and permanency. Um,
Okay.
and then for our graduate students, same thing. If their concentration or that advanced level practice has to be in one of those settings. Um, and then after they graduate, there's ongoing career development and support that happens throughout our state. And it just, all of those things are the core, but it looks a little different how that plays out depending on the university itself.
And can they work in public and or private child welfare agencies, or is it just public?
It's really set up for public.
Okay.
So our first choice is that, I mean, everything's geared towards getting an internship and job search in public or tribal, which
Yeah.
is, so again, it could be the state level. So those
Mhm.
students really want to do that macro practice with policy, state implementation. We are a state supervised, county administered state. And that's important to say because we're in the minority of states that operate that way. Most states are state supervised, state administered. And so we have 87 counties and 11 federally recognized tribes. So it looks different. So on the positive side, the counties and the tribes can really respond to practice in a way that meets the need of that community. Um, as far as like getting everything in alignment and making like decisions, like everyone practices this way, it gets a little tricky, as you can imagine. So, depending what
Okay.
state you're talking to, sometimes 4E can look really different, and some of that's adaptive to how the state system is set up. Um, so as far as, internships, so for example, if a student comes into a graduate program and they don't have an undergraduate degree in social work, they'll have to do 2 practicums. So their first one could be in a related, so that could be our private partners who are working with the same kids and families and communities, but they might be contracted by Hennepin County to assist with foster care recruitment, to assist with, um, kids who are aging out of care, and then child-specific recruitment efforts. We have some really wonderful private child welfare agencies that really help us with those kids that are mostly 14 to 17 in that age group that really could use some extra support and, just an ally to help them, many of those kids really would like to find a forever family, as they're getting into those ages, and so having that capacity to do that work. So sometimes there's those experiences that are aligned, um, but really the targeted focus is on public, um, and tribal work.
Right. Considering, Melissa, the different infrastructure that Minnesota has compared to other states that might have a Title IV program, what do you think are the key elements or components of your consortium?
Um, the key elements are, I mean, and even though it's a different structure, it's very similar, 'cause, I mean, for the consortium, so each is, we have 9 different programs, and together we all make up the consortium. So it's really wonderful opportunity to we gather at least once a month during the academic year, and then we pivot out on other, meetings for different things that might come up. Um, I don't know. I mean, I know some states also have a consortium like that, so we may or may not be unique. I'm from DCYF, so I can help organize and support and also help relay information or connection. So if a university really wants to, like, we have new policy that's being implemented in the state of Minnesota right now, and well, every state probably does, but we have some big things happening in policy in our state that's getting implemented in the counties. And so sometimes universities, it's really helpful for them to be able to connect directly to the units at the state level that are working on that, the policy and the implementation. And so I can be a liaison to help the state kind of connect to these partners, these university partners, and vice versa. Our universities all have strong partnerships with the counties and tribes and communities that they're working in. So then they can also inform us at the state of what they're seeing, and some of the challenges they might be seeing or resources needed, or also really the good things too, the shout outs. Like, wow, there's some really innovative things happening. For example, in Bemidji, some really beautiful things that are going on in the northwest part of our state, with child welfare practice and tribes, guardian ad litem's work, things like that. And that's really wonderful to be able to shine back to the state of like what's happening. That's really good practice. But really the key of each of the universities is that financial support, that educational programmatic kind of expectations, which is the coursework, the field requirements, any experiential learning, those pieces, and then the employment obligation, the tracking, and then that career development and support, which really each of the programs are working with students early on to kind of look to the future of what the expectations are, um, with being in a 4E program, and also how do they network? How do they um, amplify the experiences they've had in their internships to be able to articulate those skills? I mean, many of our students get hired at the counties or tribes that they've interned in. So that's a beautiful thing that happens because
Right.
the student gets to get to see what it's like, and also that county or tribe gets to see what that student's like in action, and so that can work beautifully. So that happens a lot. Or sometimes, a county might be, not have a vacancies, which that's a good thing. We like we like when there's stability, so that's not a negative thing. But a student might intern in one county and then be looking, and so how can they leverage that experience that they had, at that one county? I will say in our state, not every county knows of 4E, but I mean, as far as like hiring managers and things, but most do. And these students, these graduates are well sought out because we know that when we're talking about 4E, most people are thinking students, current students. But in fact, if you look out at all of our counties and tribes, they're who are running our workforce right now. They're the workforce. I mean, other people come in and are awesome workers that didn't come in through this way. Um, but a lot of the stability that's being provided in our state are our alumni from these programs.
Right. And how long, so if I started the program today, how long does it typically take to complete the consortium from start to finish, including and excluding that employment requirement?
Well, it depends on if you're undergraduate or you're graduate. It depends on if you have like in master's program, if you already have a B.S.W. or you're coming in to
Right.
social work for the first time. But in general, um, often students are receiving either 3 or 4 semesters where they're officially a part of a 4E program. And so that's where they're doing curriculum tracks or a child welfare specific course, child welfare policy that they're learning about, um, and of course, those internships. But what's really great is so students might find out about it and join right at the earliest point that they could. But also, there's some flexibility on sometimes students don't hear about it early, but then they hear through a friend or a colleague about it. And so there's opportunity for students to join maybe their final year. Um, and really for payback, it's really it's very clear cut. Like as many semesters as you receive funding and are a part of the program is the amount of time that you would be required to do the payback. So um, I guess the biggest part if you're in school and post would be 3.5 years because I'm counting 2 years of, like, in the program and then a year and a half of doing the payback,
Great. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of
but
sense.
it's nice that there's not just one way, and that's what I think makes it
Mhm.
a lot more accessible and inviting, but as we are all talking about with our career paths, you start maybe in psych or sociology or even biology. I one of my favorite students, as far as, like, an application for this program, when I was working at the University of Minnesota in their M.S.W 4E program, um, she was a firefighter, in her previous life and was joining our M.S.W program and wanted to join the 4E program. And so one of her references was from the fire chief of the community she served, which is like the most amazing recommendation. I still remember it. And this is like a decade later. But she talked about going into crisis, right? There's a fire, a family's house is on fire, and firefighter role is one role of helping address that crisis. But she learned through herself that she was more interested in helping the family, the relational parts, and like thinking about where is this family going to find food? Where is this family going to find housing? And so that was how she came in. So I really love that our students come to us from lots of different lived experiences and interests. Um, and not all students are kind of a traditional student that come in kind of high school and then go into undergrad. We do have quite a bit of students who take different paths with career and lived experiences and then come in at the time that they're ready to come in. So that's great too. hmm
That's great. It makes way for a lot of different paths through
Yes.
the program, into and through it, which provides a little bit more variety in where they can complete their employment requirement too of the kind of work they can do and the kind of social workers you're putting into the community.
So you started to talk about this, but how do students typically learn about your Title IV Child Welfare Consortium? You said that it might be colleagues or friends, but are there other ways people learn about it initially?
Yeah, I mean, every which way. We're always asking students how they find out about it, you know? Um, I mean, like, for example, there's an annual conference called MSSA, the Minnesota Social Service Association Conference. So this last March, myself, as long as representatives from 4 of our 4E programs, we did a presentation, and actually Drew and Chris were on the panel. It was really great. So, sometimes we're getting out at conferences and that can spread the word. And you never know the trickle effect with that if it's somebody in the audience or they tell their niece or, their sibling. So those ways, admissions, honestly, just kind of the typical, like I'm applying to Winona State University, and in the admissions, there's opportunities to be involved in different programs. And so a student might read about that. I think that's pretty typical. If you look on we have a website for our consortium, and so some people find us that way, where it's like shows all the consortium universities, or they might, find information on Metropolitan State University and click on that and find out about. So I think newer people coming in the field are on the internet a lot. So there's lots of searches that you can do. Um, and then, once students are in the program, so especially with our undergraduates and they're in their first or second year, we have a lot of faculty who are involved in their programs at their university who come in as guest speakers um, and talk about what this is like. Sometimes also there's cross-pollination, right? So it could be a sociology major, but you want to take a class as an elective in child welfare, and that pulls people in just because they love the class and they want to know more and might lead them in. But honestly, a lot of people learn about it from people in the field, you know, who are already doing the work.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Chris said with the Big Sister, Big Brother program, where you see someone doing work and you admire that person, and you think, how do I do that? And so sometimes it's just knowing people who are already in the field, who kind of really change the assumptions around what the work is. That helps lead people in.
Mhm.
So those are the different ways. But we're always trying to figure out like how people find us, and it's always a different story.
Yeah, Drew and Chris, as two students who went through the program, how did you each learn about the Title IV program?
I can go first. So I learned through my professor, Amber, here at M.S.W. Shout out, Amber. She came to one of my classes and presented what it's about and told us like what it had all entailed working specifically in tribal or county when you're doing your internship. And it was my senior year, so it was right before it like started up and was able to do it. So yeah, and then as soon as she said it, I went to her office right after the class and was like, "Hey, I'm interested. Like, what do I have to do to sign up and whatnot?" And she gave me all the requirements, and I had to write like a 5 or 6 page like essay type thing saying like, "This is why I want to do it. This is why I think I'm a good candidate." And then yeah, the program in general just made it easier to be a social worker with more experience than my peers.
Yeah, that's great. Chris, what about you? What was your clue into the program?
Yeah. So I was attending a college financial planning session for my daughter, who was going to be graduating high school, and learned that households with more than one person attending school typically receive more financial support. And that got me thinking because I had always wanted to go back to school and get my master's degree. But at the time, I was working full time and had two other kids who were still school aged at home. So I looked into going back to the social work program at Minnesota State Mankato. And there was a presenter who talked about the Title IV-E program and described the stipend that would cover some tuition costs and the expenses and other benefits. And as I mentioned, I was working at the time. I was already almost 20 years into my career. And so I knew the commitment of working for public child welfare after graduation was already going to be part of my plan. That's the payback. You don't actually pay the money back. You have to do it in working certain amount of months. And so that was going to be part of my plan. So I just knew right away that I was going to apply. It was perfect for me.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it works out very well aligned with your child going into college as well. Um, Drew and Chris, what do you think people need to know about the Title IV-E program to successfully secure a stipend, find the right training opportunities, and access other supports based on your own experiences?
Um, I would just say to be successful, just reach out, talk to people, knock on doors, do whatever you got to do to just learn what it's about and what's available, you know? Um, being a scholar allows individuals to have so many opportunities. So reaching out and making the most of the resources is really important, especially as like a college student when funds might be a little tight and whatnot, you know? Um, I think the thing that made it so easy was everybody has been super kind and helpful. So it didn't feel awkward or weird to try to reach out and be like, hey, what's this about? They were like excited and really forthcoming with great information. And it never felt like shameful for reaching out and asking questions. Like I never felt like asking questions. There were no wrong questions to ask. You know what I mean? So I think that really made it feel better than like other scholarships and stipends that I've pursued.
I think I would recommend that it's important in the very beginning to educate yourself on what child welfare is. When you're going to apply for the stipend, you need to know at least a little bit about what the work is, and then do that self-assessment on why this work and why me. Because you have to be able to write that essay in that first application to convey to the people who are going to evaluate that the stipends are actually very competitive, and it's not easy to get one, and you have to be able to identify why your commitment to this work is going to be meaningful to the profession. And the job search, the meetings, the networking, the the value of having that show up on your resume, I can say from my end of being in the workforce, that is a leg up when you're in the candidacy pool. It's very important.
Right.
So from the very beginning, in order to secure one of these stipends, it's important to know what it means and why it's important to be doing it.
Yeah, that's great. Especially in this market, it's helpful to have a little bit of a leg up that requires knowing why you care about this. Social work is something that, Amanda and I are both social workers by training, and it is something that requires the heart behind it in order to really do the work and do it well and to feel like you are in the right spot um, with the profession. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. And it seems like there's a lot of benefits for being part of the program. So, Drew and Chris, what kinds of supervision or mentoring or other kind of support did you receive while you were in the program?
So since I'm still like pretty new and I just graduated and whatnot, I probably don't have quite as much as maybe Chris and others that are in the program. But with that being said, the experience I've had has been absolutely amazing. Like, obviously, this podcast is a part of being a scholar. Like, I wouldn't have had this opportunity without being at Title IV. Um, but I also have experience, as stated before by Melissa, on the MSSA panel. Um, and being a scholar has allowed me to secure a job at Renville County CPS less than a month after graduating. Like, I applied to 3 jobs and I got 2 interviews immediately and was able to choose Renville because it's close and I don't got to move far to work there. So,
That's so great.
Congratulations.
thank you very much. I think that was a really, really great part of it. I was also able to take a specialized training regarding equimethable law, which helped me during my internship as I interned at Upper Sioux Community during my senior year. So I would say just those are just like a few of the things that have been like beyond like amazing for being involved with this Title IV.
Those are huge. Chris, what about you?
I agree completely. They are huge. And I really think that from the very beginning in the program, when you're doing your studies, having the focus of every project and every assignment being on child welfare and having to write your papers specifically looking at child welfare policies, to be your electives need to be about public child welfare, family services, and I when I was working while taking my courses, I was a frontline worker, and I was doing services that didn't get me at the same level. So I was in the practice during my work hours, but during my coursework, I was able to look at the macro level through the program, and I was able to look at policies and practice decisions and see how they were translating through the system because of the Title IV program. With the mentorship groups and the meetings that I went to, we were able to talk through things and get to a deeper level of understanding of what was happening. And I think that brought me to that's why a Title IV scholar comes into the workforce better trained and better prepared. Drew, that's why you got hired right away and you had your pick of the jobs. And I can confidently say that because I'm on the other side of it. I'm hiring staff and I know what an advantage it is. And I love the opportunities that this saves for the counties too. Melissa was talking about the connection between the schools and the counties, and to be able to translate back and forth how our policy decisions that are happening can interface with the training systems. The counties are not spending the money to need to ramp up the training for the workforce coming ahead. We're saving money by doing it this way. And we're able to prepare our professionals in a way that's going to better serve the public. And that's really what this is about. And I thank the consortium for it.
But also speaks to the improvement of sustainability of the workforce, that you all feel so supported and you feel so kind of shepherded through this process of the job market, the education and training pieces, and then still feel like you have a community among the other scholars when you are in the workforce and you're on the other side of things. Melissa, I'm curious if there's any other support provided to 4E students by your consortium that wasn't already mentioned by Drew or Chris.
Well, they mentioned it a little bit, but just to go a little bit more into the training. So, there's statutorily required training for anybody going into public child welfare. And it's exciting in our state right now because we have shifted into a Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy. And it used to be, that's a partnership between the University of Minnesota School of Social Work and Department of Children, Youth, and Families at the state. There's been a whole revamping of what that new worker training looks like, or you can call it foundational training. We call it new worker training now. And it really looks at not just kind of passive learning, not that it was all passive before, but really there's pauses to check knowledge, to check skill. There's simulations involved, both at the individual level and group level. Um, there's a court simulation. There's individual engagement simulations. Um, and so Drew is talking about ICWA MIFPA. So that is a piece of that falls under the umbrella of new worker training. And so all B.S.W. 4E scholars and M.S.W. 4E scholars get to go through that 2-day training. The trainers are all tribal trainers um, that come from our different tribal communities in Minnesota. And with our undergraduates, a part of that training is they spend usually one day spending time in a tribal community for a tribal event, like a powwow or some kind of celebration. So they get immersion in that experience. Um, so that training piece, if I was a B.S.W. or M.S.W. scholar, just in general in Minnesota, I wouldn't have access to that training. So they're getting to come in early to do some of that training. And so it's really exciting. And Drew was talking about his experience with that. And backing it up a bit to Chris's comment, this is hard work. A lot of people come in saying, I care about the welfare of children. Therefore, and so there's a lot of, if you ask 100 people on the street, what's child welfare, you're going to get 100 different answers. Not everybody really understands what this work is that we're talking about. It's really tough work. And, helping figure out and helping people with discernment of, is this the right path? We have tools, and a lot of states have this, but we have a really great tool in Minnesota, which is just a realistic job preview. So often our universities are using that video to have students look at that, watch it, and then do some kind of reflective question that's often a part of the application form, just to see if this is somebody who really kind of gets what they're signing up for. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to have experience in it, but they just know what they're kind of talking about. And if they're thinking, oh, I really would love to be a school social worker, that's awesome. We need great school social workers. This program's not for them right now. And so just helping people discern and figure out, is this the right path to be starting? So, so with that extra supports, training, the internships or boots on the ground stuff where internships really, I always say universities can't craft a perfect internship. You can get in a class, you can craft this beautiful syllabus. It's very planful. It's very like you can anticipate and think about ahead of time. But field is the real stuff. So I think students really get to see um, discouragement in the field. They get to see families really angry and frustrated. They see if they're in a work in a county or a space that's really understaffed or has had a lot of turnover, they get to see that. And all that's really important. It's important that we don't craft this beautiful internship experience. We want them to really see what actually is happening in the field. Um, and so with field, there's some extra supports laid in, whether that's through their field seminar. There have been with some of our 4E programs, university programs, embedded field units. Um, that's worked really well with our largest counties because I always say for recruiting for internships, it's kind of like you're standing on the edge of a pool, and sometimes the child welfare workforce is drowning, and you're just yelling down to them, "Can you take a student?" And it feels a little bit like, ah, you know. So it's a lot of investment that our counties and tribes make in these students. So with embedded field units, that would be like a university's faculty or staff working alongside the counties, doing that extra supervision that's required through Council of Social Work Education. Um, just helping support that student and helping also support that county or tribal worker. So it's kind of, a bridge between the work. And we've seen there's been embedded field units at Hennepin County and at Ramsey County. And then we've done some kind of different pilot work in some of our other schools and areas. And then the other thing was the mentor piece. There's some schools with a little bit more informal mentor projects, but the University of Minnesota Twin Cities has a formal mentoring project, which is current child welfare workers in the field agreeing to be a mentor to newly launched students into the field. And so That's awesome. So we know that's happening informally already, but this is a formal program, and that's really nice because whatever is happening on in your county or tribe, it's just great to know that you have your cohort that you graduated with at your university, but you're also a part of a statewide cohort that's graduating at the same time, and you're launching into tons of cohorts of alumni in the field. So if you can't find what you need in that workplace, you know that you can reach out and get connected to those larger groups of 4E. And we know that sustainability in the child welfare field, number one reason people stay is their team and their supervisor. So feeling like they're supported in the community or in the setting that they're going into is really helpful. There's probably other things. I mean, the experiential learning things. There's a lot going on creatively at all the different universities. We have simulations. Drew, I don't even know if you got to do that yet, but we're starting to do virtual reality simulations as a part of the academy. That was also another piece that our 9 universities got to have the technology to use in their child welfare courses. That's not available to other students. And those are specifically geared towards child welfare situations. So going into a home and looking at protective factors and risk factors and having discussions about that without having to go into someone's home as a learner yet. And, maybe just like having some discussion before your very first time is going to be going into someone's home and learning about what we might need to think about. Um,
Yeah. It's great how intentional it seems like you all are being around one, making sure your students and your scholars go in eyes wide open and they know not only what's expected of them, but what they can expect in the field. And um, I'm sure that has some weight in reducing burnout and turnover and all of those pieces because you're making sure that they know up front and that they're committed to it. And you're also taking care of the employers themselves, the agencies themselves. You're right. When you're drowning in your field and you're just losing your mind day by day with all of the different commands that are coming at you, and then someone throws an intern into the mix, you're like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do with this? And so it seems like you guys are being really thoughtful around that, which is great to hear. Um, you've spoken so much, Melissa, about the value added from being a scholar in this program. And I'm curious, Chris and Drew, from your perspective, what was most valuable to you about your Title IV-E university program?
For me, I would say the opportunities that were given to me for being a part of this program. I know it's like really cheesy, and I'm sure a lot of social workers say it, but I've always like wanted to make a difference in the world, even no matter how small, no matter how big. I just wanted to make like people happy. And I feel like the trainings offered, the money that you get for being a scholar, and the chance to work with individuals who know what they're talking about is like bar none to any opportunity I would have had not being a 4E scholar. On top of this, it opens doorways to jobs that would have been inaccessible previously for somebody straight out of college. Like my experience being able to work specifically on a tribe, and then also being able to go to specialized trainings and all, and being able to be a part of this podcast and stuff like that has allowed me to have a pretty stocked resume that really has helped me get the job that I wanted, rather than having to do something that I probably wouldn't have enjoyed as much.
That is huge. I just have to add there. That is huge.
Huge.
Yes.
Walking into the job you wanted post grad, first job, is something that is so rare. So yeah. And also, it's not
Absolutely.
cheesy. That is needed. So, yeah, that's wonderful. Chris, what about you?
I'm not sure that I have a whole lot to add to all of that. I really can't underpin enough how beneficial the financial piece of it is. The stipend was just so helpful to me during the time of life that I was in. I don't know if I could have gotten back into school at the time. Without the stipend, it really, really helped offset the tuition costs for me, and that was very important. I was a non-traditional student, and it was very important in helping move my career forward and helping my family. So that was very important, just at the most basic level. But as Drew said, all of the other opportunities and the extension of the program beyond that is so important. I think the other value of the Title IV-E program beyond Minnesota is the network of Title IV-E that's created across the country. We're developing a professional learning network that's creating skilled navigators that are able to assess, engage, evaluate, and manage in an efficient and successful way for families, that's creating professionals that can thread together the ability to see systems gaps and opportunities to create efficiencies and identify areas of improvement that can create lasting change to some of the generational problems that have been impacting their society for a long time. And that's just really important. So I I can't say enough about this program. It's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I I'm curious, Chris, because you worked in the child welfare field prior to becoming a Title IV scholar and have since been in the field. Can you talk a little bit about how your Title IV program and the training that involved has impacted your work?
Prior to the Title IV-E program, I was a children's mental health worker. So I was working with children's mental health programming, and becoming a scholar, I transitioned into the child welfare, child protection. So my internship needed to be in a different area of focus. So I moved into child protection, and actually my internship took me to a different level of leadership. In my agency, there was an opening for a supervisor position that I applied for and was very, very fortunate. I had the opportunity to become a leader, and it put me on a different path of impacting the human services system in a different way, and expanded my practice at a different level. And it's just opened doors that I just never imagined I would have an opportunity to do.
You know, I just feel like we've learned so many amazing things about the Title IV education program. And before we wrap up, I just want to make sure if there's anything else you think that someone interested in a career in child welfare should know about the Title IV education programs.
One thing I'll say is, when people think child welfare or child protection, they think, oh, you're stealing kids. Um,
Mhm.
and so I would say to anybody who's possibly interested that that's not what's happening. And that, in fact, this is really about partnering with families and communities to increase supports and resources um, so that either they don't enter if they're on the verge of entering,
Right.
or that if they do enter formally, that we get them what they need so that um, they don't need to be in this system anymore, and can really get back on their feet. The other thing I say to interested students who used to meet with me to talk about if thinking about this is that um, I don't know a better program to really learn about doing work with people. And how Drew was saying, you wanted to come in it to really help people. Um, and I don't know another field where you learn this much about policy, poverty, domestic violence, chemical health, mental health, housing issues, anything that our society struggles with, that people struggle with. Um, Families don't come into the system because they don't love their children. I've never met a family that doesn't love their kids, but when abuse and neglect shows up in families, there's a lot going on for that family. Um, and so coming into child welfare, you get to learn a lot about that. And so, kind of as Chris was saying, you get to be a more effective social worker, impactor. Um, you get to leverage that knowledge. And so, even if you don't stay in child welfare for 50 years, or whatever, some people do, some people pivot into education or mental health systems and other things. You will be that much better prepared to go into those systems that are supporting each other. So I like that. The other thing is just emphasizing kind of Chris's path, that we have traditional students, but there's so much room in this field to where people who have been going out and working in some other capacity to come back and learn about this. And also we have so many people doing the work, and maybe they have their undergraduate degree, but they've been thinking about getting a master's degree, and that there really is a place for them to learn new things, even if they worked in child welfare for 10 years or 15 years. There's ability to be flexible around the curriculum and especially the internships. And I've worked with students who are doing like leadership internships. So kind of what Chris said, going into like learning how to be a supervisor. At the state level, we have students who've helped some policy implementation, like working on teams at the state level to help the counties and tribes implement new policies. And so there's a place and space, I think, for everyone in this work. And I really don't know another training program that you're not going to learn more about making impactful changes in the lives of kids and families.
Yeah, that really is.
It's fantastic.
Drew and Chris, do you have anything else to add? I know Melissa said it all so well, but we're happy to hear more.
She really did. She really did. And the only thing that I would say is the work is it, there's no perfect path in. There's no perfect path through. The work can sometimes be a little bit messy, but it's always so valuable, and there's joys everywhere. And I think there's always reward to it. I think this network creates the commitments that support people through their careers, and creates the retention that people are looking for, keeping them in. And I'm just so thankful for it. So thank you for inviting us on here today, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I want to thank you all from joining and sharing all of your insight with us today. I think that this has been great to learn more about the Title 4E program, not just in terms of improving the future workforce, but in terms of how much y'all are doing right now with this background and all of this training. It's just really exciting to hear about it.
Yes, thank you all so much. What a treat to chat with you. To everyone who tuned in for this conversation, thank you for listening to today's podcast. Remember to stay tuned for upcoming episodes in which we'll continue to bring you information about the pathways to build and sustain productive and rewarding careers in child welfare. If you enjoy our podcast episodes, please share them with your colleagues and others who may find them relevant and useful. We're your hosts,
Amanda Barczyk
and Leah Bouchard, and this has been a James Bell Associates podcast.
This podcast series was produced and distributed by James Bell Associates on behalf of the Children's Bureau, Administration for Children and Families, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, under contract number HHS P 233-201-500-133I. The opinions and ideas expressed in the podcasts are those of the panelists and do not necessarily represent the official views, policies, or positions of the Children's Bureau, the Administration for Children and Families, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.